we're holding steady at around 27 participants. And I believe I got word that there are no persons that are giving public comment. For future reference, we normally have a, oh, now I'm forgetting the name of the council.
Instructional council.
Instructional council, yes.
Instructional council.
But today, I think that we'll just move straight into the business at hand. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Ron or Dr. Roby, Dr. Gorman. Okay, we'll start with Dr. Roby. Thank you all for doing this.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Baker and members of the Academic Achievement Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present our proposed Return to Learn plan. Our academic team has worked hard in collaborating with the Teachers Union, reviewing feedback from our parents and staff, and putting together the fine details of the plan. Following our announcement last Monday about our plan to start virtually for the first 9 weeks of the 2021 school year, we received largely positive support for the decision from parents and staff alike, particularly for putting student and staff safety first. Of course, there are also concerns raised, including but not limited to the quality, quantity, rigor, and consistency of virtual learning, childcare issues and concerns, special education concerns, social emotional impacts on virtual learning, the implementation plans to the return to in-person or hybrid, and ensuring the safety of students and staff, cleaning and sanitization of buildings, and some others. As you will see in the presentation that Dr. Gorman is about to give, we are listening and we're working to address questions and concerns in our plan. And we've also are planning for a return to in-person learning and teaching may look like in the future. As we weigh our options for getting back to school in some form of in-person after the first 9 weeks, I think it's really important to highlight our thinking and rationale around the 100% distance learning versus hybrid or the 100% in-person learning. We have repeatedly stated the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff are and will continue to be the top priority in our decision-making. Some key points in favor of 100% distance learning. By far the clearest choice when it comes to safety, health, and well-being of our students, staff, and families. CDC guidelines for in-person learning are very strict, expensive, and difficult to ensure there's fidelity in implementation across all classrooms and all schools. The question is, can we effectively and consistently put mitigation strategies in place? As a district, I'm confident that we can, but having the additional time over the next 9 weeks will help us feel better prepared. The use of non-traditional spaces such as cafeterias, the media center, gym, etc., when classrooms cannot effectively hold all students in social distancing guidelines and staffing and logistical challenges that are required to make the additional planning with school leaders and teachers being a part of that process. Lastly, I have to emphasize that science will drive our practices, not politics. 100% virtual start for the first 9 weeks is the safest way to start and allows the necessary time for individualized plans at each school to be developed with direct input from not only our teachers and school leaders and support staff who will be responsible for implementing the plans. With that said, we also know what's best for students academically, socially, emotionally, and physically is in-person direct instruction. So while we're planning for 100% virtual start, we have been and needed to continuously work together between now and October 21st on our detailed plans for the multiple entry points for face-to-face learning or hybrid instruction. Any reopening for hybrid or 100% in-person will be informed by both federal, state, and county health officials, as well as the governor's office using science and data to drive our decisions. We have to closely monitor what is happening in other districts and the trend lines, particularly those in our region, to see what's working, what may not be working, what may be appropriate as the evolution of rolling towards the in-person learning format continues. With that, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Gorman for the presentation, and we will follow up with discussion and questions. Dr. Gorman?
All right, thank you, Dr. Roby. And with me today is, of course, Jonathan Harper, Director of Curriculum. So he will be helping me from time to time in specific areas of the presentation, or if we need some additional clarification. So please be patient while I share my screen.
And just while you do that, just want to make sure, thank you, Dr. Roby, for that summary of the decision-making process. I think it's really important that as the board is questioning the community, that we understand that there was a very serious process that went into this, and that we want to accept the decision as being at least one that was made with the best interest.
Okay, so just a quick check. Can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up? Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much for allowing our team to present today. I will right into the presentation. Okay, so first and foremost, as Dr. Roby referenced, we will have virtual learning in the Grand Rapids Public Schools for the first 9 weeks of school. One thing that is considerably different this time is that we are going to have one-to-one computer internet access for all students in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. We did not have one-to-one in the spring, nor were we a one-to-one school district. So we're trying to find as many silver linings as possible during this very difficult time. And of course, going one-to-one district-wide is something that we are very proud of and give more of our students access. The learning management platforms that we are going to use, for those folks who are in the elementary environment, they will be using Seesaw. Our elementary families are familiar with Seesaw, and then our high school families are familiar with Google Classroom or the G Suite. We will also be having some schools pilot Schoology, which is a learning management system. And I know some folks are very excited about it. So we will be piloting that for some schools in the fall. This is something that I want to reference as we have to one day, or we're hopeful to one day, move into phases 5 and 6, or maybe even phase 4. We're currently in phase 4 with our 9-week distance learning model. But and I know there's lots of text on this slide, but we are recommending a model when we go back to face-to-face that allows our students to have spacing in classrooms. And the only way we can do that is essentially through this A-B schedule, where you would essentially have half of the class attend either on a Monday and a Tuesday with a break in between, and then the other half of the class attending school on a Thursday and a Friday with a break in between, of course, or an alternate week model. On the days on which the students are not going to class during this particular model, of course, there would be some distance learning that would continue. We wanted to set the stage for kind of a gradual entry point once we conclude this exclusively distance learning period. Meal distribution, of course, is a requirement in our plan, so we are very thankful that we can continue to feed our families. We are going to feed our families 3 days per week. All students in the Grand Rapids Public Schools are eligible for meals, and of course, parents may pick up those meals as well. Meal distribution will begin August 24. That's actually the day before school starts up. Students will have the opportunity for breakfast and lunch, but we're going to distribute those items Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And of course, on some days, we will have to double up to ensure that our students get the meals that they deserve. There are going to be multiple distribution sites throughout the city, and you'll see that I've mentioned them below. Alger Buchanan, Burton Campus, Cesar Chavez, City High Middle, Dickinson, East Leonard, Gerald Ford, C.A. Frost High, Harrison, Kent Hills, Ottawa Hills, Sherwood, Sibley, and Westwood. So this is one major change, whereas before we had, I believe 6 sites or maybe 7 sites was our maximum. We've added some sites to provide more access to our community. Mealtime is a little bit later, and the reason it's a little bit later from 12 until 1:30 is because we're going to have instruction going on just before that. So we wanted to allow some time to get to the meal site during those synchronous learning times. Building access for staff. This is one major change from the spring. In the spring, there was very limited access for our staff members. If you remember, we provided a day where staff members could come in and get their belongings. And this is drastically different from that. So we're increasing the hours for staff members to enter buildings. Staff members are now going to be able to access buildings Monday through Thursday. There will be no access on Friday. Friday will be used for really a deep cleaning day in our school district. Teachers will have full classroom access. There will be full classroom access for staff during regular business hours, which are 8 o'clock until 3 p.m. We only want staff members to be in the building during this time. We do not want children or extra adults in the building. Our main goal is to keep everyone safe. Cleaning and sanitizing will take place every evening and on Fridays in those particular buildings. And then we're going to have our staff members follow cleaning protocols when accessing their classrooms. So essentially, when you walk into your classroom, if you touch a light switch as a teacher, you'll be responsible to kind of wipe down that light switch, wipe down your desk area, wipe down your computer before leaving for the day. So essentially, for lack of a better term, kind of cover your tracks wherever you've gone that day. There'll be some responsibilities that if you go into the building to work, there will be some cleaning responsibilities. Again, this is not mandatory. It's not mandatory for teachers to come in during this time. They may continue to work from home. But one thing we heard last time is that, we really need access to the items that we have in our classroom. And we thought this was a really good way to provide those resources. Teachers, of course, can use the phone to call families, the computer, and other resources they need to be successful. This is really a parent empowerment slide. So we want to place a tremendous amount of emphasis this time on kind of decentralization. In the spring, we were really heavy on, calling Grand Rapids Public Schools Administration Central Office for everything. And we would really like to get into the schools being the first point of contact, where if teachers are, if parents have questions or exhibiting challenges, their first call is to the school. Of course, we have a tremendous amount of resources to support parents and families after that and students, but really the schools are that first point of support. And you can see many of the numbers that are on here to support our families. You've got tech support, which is the distance learning help desk at grps.org. There's also a phone number you can call. This is specifically for tech issues. We also have parent support with our parent university at parents.grps.org. There's lots of social emotional support through modules, and this is just one way that we are going to address social emotional support. But parents.grps.org, we're creating modules to support our families. Translation and interpretation services. This is the direct number to our English language, to our English learners office. So therefore, you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. You can go direct using this particular number. Our PALs, our parent action leaders, our family support services, our Kent Schools Services Network, those are also going to be supports that are in place for our parents. And then lastly, questions as it relates to 504 plans or IEPs. This is going to be a number that goes directly to our special education office to provide some supports for our families. GRPS device distribution, as I alluded to earlier, we are going one-to-one in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. Not only are we going one-to-one from a computer distribution perspective, we are also going one-to-one from an internet perspective. We know that under our last plan, we had lots of students in households sharing computers, and under our new model, we really need students to have their own computers, of course, that we will provide if students don't have access. Of course, these are the internet requirements, and these are acceptable devices that are also on the slide. But again, we will be providing these resources for students who do not have these resources. We will know that there will be some barriers to distance learning and, of course, internet access. So Our main priority is to identify those families that have connectivity barriers so that we can resolve them. So this will be a full court press with our principals, deans, school improvement facilitators, assistant principals, just all of the supports that we have, especially teachers, to really finding out who's having those connectivity challenges, and let's get those addressed right away. Again, we're using some existing GRPS student devices to help our families, but in some instances where those devices weren't the best in the spring, we will be replacing those items for the fall. We'll also be providing some hardware not currently owned by GRPS, specifically hotspots. In many instances, the hotspots that we distribute are better than the internet service that is provided, because you can turn on a hotspot and get internet right away. So for some folks that have internet challenges, sometimes the hotspot is a better way to go. Okay, device distribution. So now I'm really getting into the nuts and bolts of the plan. A letter was mailed to families to provide notification regarding technology distribution and technology support. So that has gone out. Parents will be receiving that quickly. Distribution is going to take place August 17 all the way through August 23. Now, of course, August 17 for the first couple of weeks, this is going to be our busiest time, but we're keeping that window open until October 23, because that's essentially the date at which we could potentially be face-to-face, of course, if conditions change significantly. So the August 17 through October 23 is our 9-week period of time, and we are providing distribution services throughout that time. Distribution locations, we have them listed, of course, on the slide. Gerald R. Ford City, Harrison, Burton Middle School, and 1340 Thomas, which, if you're familiar with Franklin campus, it's right next to Franklin campus. It's formerly known as the Campus Early Childhood Center, or I'm sorry, Campus Early Childhood Center. So those are the areas at which our families can get devices. The dates at which folks can get devices are, of course, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 9 o'clock until 6 p.m. So a tremendous amount of time to get those resources to our families. Of course, the next couple of bullets, or the next bullet rather, talks about some of the supports that we have, of course, for our families that need support from a distance learning perspective. Professional learning. So we kicked off our professional learning yesterday with our administrators. It was really a phenomenal session. We addressed many of the items that I'm going to talk about here. Of course, COVID-19 safety protocols. This was an area of emphasis for us. We had a professional learning led by Sharon Pitts and Kim Barron. Sharon Pitts, of course, our legal counsel for the district, and Kim Barron is essentially director of nursing for the district. So they walked us through many of those COVID-19 protocols. There'll be some schools that will be involved in a Schoology pilot. Again, we'll have Seesaw, Microsoft Teams. So many of these are heavy with platforms, and then curriculum support, with the exception, of course, of the COVID-19 piece. And then in addition, we've got professional learning that will continue on social emotional learning, trauma-informed best practices, equity, implicit bias, and culturally responsive education. This is much of the work that was happening in the district pre-COVID-19, and this is really work that absolutely needs to happen with our teachers and with our principals. So we are not taking our foot off the gas pedal with these types of professional learning opportunities. We just have a couple more that we need to add as a result of COVID-19. Okay, special education. So we're going to continue to have high expectations for our students with disabilities. We are going to continue to meet the needs of our students with disabilities. IEPs are going to have to be, of course, revised during this period of time so that we are in compliance. But one area where there will be some face-to-face is, of course, during those evaluation portions. It's very difficult to do those through a distance learning format. So this is one area where we will have some face-to-face. That'll be for special education evaluations. We're going to follow all the compliance pieces that need to be followed, IDEA, etc. And so this is something that is not placed on the back burner. This is a tremendous area of emphasis for us. English learners, the same. We are going to continue providing the supports that we provide for our English learners. We are going to ensure that we have synchronous and asynchronous instruction, and I will get into that during the portion of the time where I break down the schedule for the day. We are going to, of course, engage our families with translations and interpretations during that piece, and we are going to continue to connect our families with those community agencies that can provide essential supports for our English learners. Assessments. So one of the expectations coming back to school is to ensure that we know where our students are as it relates to their academic achievement. In the Grand Rapids Public Schools, there are many assessments that we have in-house. It is not our plan to add another assessment to our teachers. The last thing we want is assessment fatigue. Therefore, there are many assessments that we use in-house already. Here are some examples of these. We'll be finalizing which assessments we use soon. Of course, there's Go Math assessments, which are aligned to the curriculum. Of course, grade level assessments. And so we're not going to be kind of reinventing the wheel. We have some assessments that will measure where our students are, and we will be using those. As it relates to after-school programming, there are 20 schools in the Loop program. So of course, Loop will look different than it has in the past. There will still be programming that is provided. It will be through a distance learning format. It begins a little after the school year starts on September 8th. It's 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. We provide Loop provides academic support and enrichment support, and there is an online enrollment process for Loop. Athletics. So this slide has a tremendous amount of information on it. But really, in a nutshell, we are going to follow the MHSAA requirements for athletics in the Grand Rapids Public Schools. Students may continue to participate in athletics as long as the guidelines are followed. Our students have been working together with their teams this summer. Many of the activities, of course, are in considerably smaller groups than a normal building setting. Teams, range from, in some instances, 5 players, other instances, 40 players. But of course, we're not proposing to put 1,000 folks on a field or spectators or things of that nature. There are some really rigorous protocols as it relates to athletics. There's a pre-workout screening. Of course, after the colon, all checklist items must be checked before participation is approved. So that needs to be completed every single day with a screener for athletics. Okay, so this is a really important slide to show, what is the same and what is different from, of course, the previous time in the spring to this time. So one major difference from the spring to the fall is one-to-one devices for our students. And that is something we're very excited about. Internet access, one-to-one, that is the difference. And we're very excited about that as well. If you look at attendance, I'm just moving this around a little bit so I can see my screen. If we look at student attendance, one major difference is we are taking attendance in the fall. Attendance was taken in, I guess I could say, a little looser manner in the spring, but there will be an expectation during those synchronous learning times, which I will address in some subsequent slides. This is the time where the student is interacting, a teacher and students are interacting online, much like we are in this presentation. So attendance will be taken when teachers and students are working in a synchronous environment. As it relates to grades, of course, in the spring, grades were heavy on participation, credit, no credit. We'll be moving back in the fall to an A through E grading system, and we will be ensuring that we have grades for the first marking period. As it relates to our educational platforms, the only thing that is changing from a platform perspective is some of the schools will be piloting using the Schoology learning management system. And then lastly is heavy on teacher access. Of course, there was one day to collect personal items and there was no additional building access. We've changed that significantly to the 4-day model with the full classroom access, and the cleaning and sanitizing will take place on the evenings and on Fridays. Okay, so this is an example of a schedule from pre-K5 through pre-K8. So I've got 2 slides I want to share with you from pre-K5 to pre-K8. The first is just a general overview of the student's day. And then the next one will be add a little more specificity. We'll use a time frame. So Mondays at the elementary level will be used for teacher planning time, teacher professional development, asynchronous learning assignments, meaning assignments that the teachers give where they can upload videos for students, assign assignments to students, assign some reading assignments as well, but there will not be any synchronous time. This is synchronous, what we're doing now. Monday will be exclusively asynchronous, but there will also be opportunities to teach art, music, and PE from an asynchronous format. When we get into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, is when we get into synchronous learning. So there will be portions of time throughout the day, and I'll get to that on my next slide, where the teacher is interacting in real time with the students. The mornings will be really real-time interaction. Afternoons will be time for some small group work with students, office hours for teachers so they can connect with individual students, reach out to families, etc. And then Fridays here, we go back to asynchronous learning assignments, student interventions, professional learning, and then weekly staff meetings for our team. Let me break this down to you. I think this one is a little clearer. So on the previous slide, I tried to just give you a general description. This is really a K5 through K8 example. So again, Monday's heavy on teacher planning and asynchronous learning. But when you go to Tuesday, and you'll notice the times up above from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. 9 a.m. the students will start their day. The teacher will teach 2 hours of synchronous learning at the elementary level. Of course, there will be a break in between. We want to be very sensitive to screen time. And then that 3rd hour of synchronous learning for teachers is they're going to be pulling small groups of students in to video conferencing calls, much like this one. So there'll be 3 hours of synchronous time for students, 2 hours of whole group, 1 hour of small group. And then in the afternoon, and there can also be some asynchronous specials during those small group times. So when a teacher is working with small groups of students, there are going to be asynchronous opportunities with lots of flexibility for our specials teachers. The afternoons on those days, the teachers will have office hours, and there will also be opportunities for asynchronous learning. A student's day is not changing. I mean, it's changing significantly, but there's still an expectation that students will work throughout the day, either synchronously or asynchronously. And then, of course, as we go through the week, you'll notice that Friday could be a student assessment day, asynchronous learning day, student interventions, office hours, etc. Let's shift to high schools. So with high schools, here is a 6 through 12 example. You will see that the students will receive schedules for their 1st through 6th hours. And we really wanted to do this for consistency, because if we go back to face-to-face, we don't want there to be a whole lot of time where students have to transition from one mode of instruction to the next. So on Mondays, students will attend their 1st, 2nd, and 3rd hour courses. You can see that the courses go from 9 until 9:50, and there's a 10-minute break there where students can log off, take a breath before they need to get into their next class. You will also see that there's office hours for teachers where they can do some they can have some interactions with families, maybe some asynchronous work. And then of course at the high school level, they have a prep hour, right? So you will see that on here as well. We're trying to stay as consistent as possible. Tuesdays will go 4th, 5th, and 6th hour. So students will go 1st through 3 on Monday, 4th, 5th, and 6th on Tuesday, and then they will repeat that. Friday is, of course, 6-hour day with student assessments, asynchronous learning, etc. So you can see the elementary model and the high school. You've seen the elementary model and the high school model. Both are heavy on synchronous learning between 9 a.m. until noon each day. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. You know, some questions about class schedules and teacher assignments. Pre-K 5 to Pre-K 8 teachers, we are going to send a notification out before next week Thursday, August 13, around who your students' elementary teachers are going to be. And then we're also, by next week Thursday, going to mail those high school and middle school schedules to our families so that they can very easily log on to their first hour teacher, second hour teacher, etc. Principals and our school-based families, of course, will be following up. Again, we want them to be the first point of contact. And if we have parents out there who haven't opted in to receive text messages, robocalls, and emails, we absolutely need that to happen if that hasn't happened already. And then lastly, I just want to place emphasis on schools are the first point of contact. I know I've said that a lot through the presentation, but we really want families to be interacting with those folks who know their students the best. The district is always going to be here to provide support, but we really want schools to be the first point of contact. That said, district information, we've got our main phone number, which is 819-2000. This is for general questions. So any questions that you have, that our community members have, if you don't know who else to call this number and we will lead you in the right direction. The 616-301-1111 number, of course, is that distance learning hotline. You'll see our GRPS website, distance learning support, distancelearninghelpdesk.grps.org. Dr. Roby and her team are going to be having listening sessions throughout distance learning and after. And this is not a time where there are going to be presentations to the community. This is going to be a time where Dr. Roby and her team listen to concerns. Listen to concerns, take notes, and work toward resolving maybe some challenges that may arise. And of course, we want to do our very best this time to limit the amount of communication. Some of the feedback we received is you guys communicated very, very well, but sometimes there were lots of communications. We're going to ensure that those frequently asked questions, those living FAQs, are on grps.org. So when we have some new information, we'll put it on our website. And then lastly, this is a great resource, feedback and clarifying questions at communications@grps.org. So that concludes my presentation. I'm sorry if I went relatively quickly. A lot of information to put in a little amount of time. I'm hoping that I gave a pretty good explanation of what our plans are for the fall.
Just open it up for questions from the other committee members.
I don't have any questions.
Yeah, some of the things that I had jotted down just in terms of some of the social emotional pieces. I assume that we're going to be getting a little bit more details on what that's going to look like for this coming school year, as well as the trauma informed and how that is going to be rolled out or continuing to happen more specifically. I really like that we're using our parent university as our platform, as we have in the past, really teaching a lot of the kinds of things that are already, I think, are some of the stuff is already on video that parents could brush on, but using that platform, I appreciate that. And then just with the at-risk, I know I've had some parents concerned about special ed and those kinds of things. So
Was that a question, John?
that was that was a question.
I'm sorry. So as it relates to the social emotional piece, so of course, working with Mr. Atkins' office with the social emotional videos that we're going to be placing on the website, the modules, also relying on our, of course, school social workers, our counselors, all of our deans, all of the supports that we have at the building level. And of course, Reverend Matias, connecting folks to community partners when they need some resources that are outside of what the school can provide. So again, we can unpack that much further, but those are just some examples of some of the things that we're doing for the fall.
So I had just a couple clarifying questions just for myself. So there's the online, so there's September, there's through October 23rd. If we went to a new phase, so 5 or 6, before October 23rd, would we transition to the hybrid automatically?
Yes, we are, and I don't want to say automatically, we are working through our plan as to what that roll-in would look like, as we are still trying to fine tune our details around the plan. And even as we shared with the community and you all last week, related to this was, you know, our first guess at what the first 9 weeks will look like, but there's some assumptions that we will stay at kind of phase 4 where we are. And if we advance up to phase 5 and phase 6, we'd have to figure out how do we slowly bring people back in and have a structure in place so that families and students and staff feel comfortable.
And then secondly, related to that, as long as we're in even 5 or 6, we would expect to stay at least the hybrid model before going back to the full.
Yes, we would bring forward any changes back to this committee and then also to the full board related to that. And so we couldn't just definitively say, you know, at phase 5, we go back to in-person, or phase 6, we want to make sure that we did provide some options, and then also looking at what does our data say for our county, and also watching what other districts are doing and seeing how
Right.
how their success has been.
Right. The other, I mean, a lot of my questions are things that I know that you guys have already thought of and have taken into account, but just that, you know, I expect there's gonna be, just like every other school year where we're kind of hunting students down after the semester starts, the school year starts, you know, that there's gonna be efforts to reach out to kids that we're expecting to show up and haven't.
Yes, we are using our ancillary and support staff as part of kind of, we want you back, and finding out where students may have gone. And that also includes kind of just that overall student engagement. Even if someone does start with us and they seem to kind of trail off, having some structures in place. Usually the teacher is the classroom teacher is the first line of defense when he or she notices that a student has not been checking in on a regular basis, to reach out to that student to find out if there are barriers, and if not successful, other resources, including counselors and social workers, parent advocates and such, to kind of make that connection with our students and their families to find out how do we help bridge that gap so that they can stay engaged.
Yeah, to me, that seems like the main link to get at John's concerns about social emotional, is that I can't imagine not discovering that there's needs in the household that we do not know about, and then what to do with that information. So. The kind of the final question, and this is something that I think that we should just consider, that this committee is going to have to address all year long. So this isn't really necessarily connected to the plan, but my sense is that we have, first of all, we have lost learning from the spring. I mean, theoretically, we would probably have students behind, where they will be placed, where they should be ready for when they're placed at the next level. And then secondly, I would imagine that there's going to be a good percentage of students who never really get caught up through this online plan, that they're going to be kind of behind their peers in terms of catching on to this new learning style. So it seems like we're going to have to address how to play catch up all year long, and what that strategy looks like.
And I would say, and team, please join in. I would say that that is the question of how do we do that? And then being flexible, understanding that there's not going to be a one size fits all. It's taking a multi-pronged approach through after-school programming, through connecting students in the schedule that Ron just described. It's really important during those smaller kind of asynchronous times where teachers are pulling students into smaller groups to do some individualized or smaller group instruction and working with students to ensure that they are getting some of those supports. But we certainly will be leaning on our community partners, the Loop program and such, so that we are, again, finding different ways to meet students at different levels depending on what their needs are.
Dr. Baker, I think the assessment piece is really important, doing that right away to determine how much learning was lost. So then we can put a plan of action together right away. To Dr. Roby's point, there's lots of opportunities for small groups with this mode of instruction. And I'm hopeful that we look at this, and I know we will, through an equity lens to ensure that the students who need the most get the most.
Just following up with Dr. Baker in regards to, what we knew even prior to COVID and schools having to close and so forth, in terms of kids that were already behind, and in most cases, teachers pass that information on to the grade above saying, hey, Johnny was struggling in these areas and so forth. Do you have a sense, obviously given this unique time, of the numbers or kids that teachers are able to report on and say to their peers on how those things were going, and then hopefully looking and sifting through that data to make sure that you're touching base with students that, as you're saying, Dr. Gorman, that need the most will get the most?
I think those, Reverend Matias, those professional learning times, right? The Mondays and Fridays are going to be very important for staff members to collaborate. Not only staff members who are at the same grade level, but staff members, maybe a teacher has of course, teaching fourth grade, and the third grade teacher has many insights on areas on which the student was exhibiting challenges from the previous year. So there are going to be lots of opportunities for dialogue, but I think that is absolutely essential to address many of the needs that our students have. And so the PLC structure will be a structure that is embedded throughout our practice in this upcoming school year and beyond.
Yeah, I have one. This is a big philosophical question. So when I look at this plan, to me, from my lens, and also as an educator, it seems like a very extensive, well thought out plan to do instruction, and yet a lot of the questions that we're getting in the community that we're going to continue to get, and this is not I'm not asking you to respond to this in terms of what GRPS is going to do about it, but to some extent to be ready for this conversation, and I'm sure tonight it would come up, is our schools do so much more than instruction, and certainly the efforts to distribute devices, to distribute food, to arrange for whatever possible after-school programs are available. But how do we have the conversation that we're both concerned, but also to some extent incapable of handling the responsibilities that everybody places on what happens in the schools? I mean, I think that most of us here have older kids, but Kim's got these little kids that keep running around her computer, and and she's supposed to be teaching outdoor education in a few weeks. So, and that's, and that's Kim. I mean, it's like, and she knows what education looks like. So how are you guys responding to some of these bigger questions right now? And maybe the board consider ways to respond ourselves.
Yeah, I think that is a huge concern for me, given that I know that in a lot of ways I have a lot of privilege. I know I'm going to be able to make it work. I have a huge support system. And so I do worry about these families where both parents need to work. And I know they're probably worried about all of those things. I'm just wondering if we could at least, we have wonderful community partners and we have our social workers and community liaisons. I'm just wondering if we can make like a clear pathway for parents so that if they have like one big concern, they know who their first steps are to go talk to, or, make that very clear for them. And I know in a lot of ways, like Dr. Gorman said, the school is the first responder for that type of thing. And I know that my kids' school would be super helpful if we went and asked them. But yeah, I do think that's something that we're probably all concerned about, and each family is uniquely different and has different concerns, and it's impossible to fix every problem, but yeah, I just hope that we're doing our best to at least make sure people have those resources readily available.
To that point, I agree. I think that it's how do we make some connections for families, and obviously people's situations and uniqueness of their family makeup and their needs will vary by the family itself. But making sure that from a structural standpoint, our PALs, which stands for, and I'm going to get myself in trouble as I say this, I think it's Parent Advocate Leaders.
Parent action leader, Dr. Roby. You were
Parent action leaders.
I was
Okay,
just gonna
thank you.
say,
Parent action leaders, our social workers, our counselors, who often know kind of some of those specific resources around kind of social and kind of wellness types of things within the community where there's some free access. And then also we have community partners through Kid Basket and some other places and our local churches and places of worship, and just making sure that we are keeping a list for families in different categories around different resources as a tool. I think, equipping our secretaries is also important. So, because often they are the first person who will respond to any phone calls related to specific needs, and making sure that either they have the same information or they're able to link that family or that request to the appropriate staff member within the district as a place. And it is very complicated and it is very nuanced, and we want to be accessible and be a true resource for what people are needing. Yet I want to caution also that there is no way that we are able to fulfill every possible kind of situation, and balancing that sweet spot of, yes, how are we connecting people to resources, but we can't be all the resources, because then we're getting away from the work that we are supposed to be charged with, which is educating young people. And that's a difficult place to be in. And so I'm not, saying it's one or the other. It's how do we do both and do them well so that people get what they need.
and just Dr. Gorman, I did want some clarification. I know that you mentioned that the EL office, and you put a number on there. Is it moving in terms of interpretation and translation? Is it moving more towards families that need translation, whether it's Spanish or other languages, are going to be able to go there, particularly, our majority Hispanic families?
We're really just trying to streamline, the process for our English learners and their families, just really a one-stop shop, a direct line for all the supports that they need. So of course I mentioned a few, but this is really the first point of contact. We're not asking you to dial another number. Of course, if you forget that number, dial 819-2000. But just really the place that can get to the cusp of many of the challenges that you're facing as a parent.
Well, I think that we should go ahead and finish this discussion up. You all have so maybe you could see this as a dress rehearsal for tonight. So anyway, normally we're all much more long-winded. So especially Jonathan Harper over here, you just can't stop him from talking. So so don't let this make you think that our meetings will be short, Dr. Roby. Our meetings can get real long. So anyway, but I thank everyone. Thank you for the work on the plan. And Dr. Roby, I mean, here you have a time that is maximum amount of community engagement, and yet you're new to the community yourself. So appreciate you trying to make that transition, and you do have a good team with you, and also please continue to see your board as a team too. So any other comments before we close? We will move back to our regular schedule, I think. First Wednesday in the month.
Yeah.
Dr. Baker.
Which would be, so guess we'll have some real world experience to discuss then. So. All right, well.
We'll make
Anyone
those
else?
connections, Dr. Baker. We'll make those connections and get subsequent meetings scheduled with content, et cetera.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, everyone. We'll see you all soon. Take care.
All right.